Australia, December 2025. Bondi, a public gathering, a religious holiday, happy people, and suddenly, gunfire. Within hours, Australia's leaders were back in front of microphones, promising what they always promise after a tragedy.
Gun licensing issues that are prerogative.
Stricter gun laws. For many Australians, that response felt familiar, almost automatic, because Australia already has some of the strictest gun laws on earth. And yet, here we are again. A new tragedy, a familiar response. To understand how Australia reached this point, you have to go back to the moment it didn't just change its gun laws, it reset them. Chapter 1, The Reset. Before 1996, Australia didn't treat firearms as a national emergency. Gun ownership existed mostly in rural life. That's farmers, pest control, hunters, and sports shooters. Regulation existed, but it lived at the state level, and it wasn't driven by ideology or panic. Firearms weren't symbols, they were tools. Australia had laws, but it didn't have a national obsession with guns, either for or against them. There was no constitutional fight, no cultural line in the sand, which matters, because when a country doesn't anchor something as a right, it becomes easier to reframe it as a risk. Then came Port Arthur, one attack, one national trauma, and one political conclusion. This can never happen again. Not, how do we prevent the next one? Not, what failed? But never again. What followed wasn't a single law, but a national agreement, the National Firearms Agreement, or NFA. It moved fast, it moved decisively, and it moved with broad public support. Every state and territory was pulled into the same framework. Most semi-automatic rifles and a lot of faster shotguns were basically off limits for regular people, except for a few job-related exceptions. A mandatory buyback seized and destroyed hundreds of thousands of firearms. And almost overnight, the public philosophy changed with it. Firearms were no longer treated as tools or property. They were treated as exceptions. And in Australia, exceptions don't stay narrow. Once something is framed as an emergency problem, the solution isn't debate, it's control. And the Aussies were good with it. Chapter 2. Permission, not rights. Here's the most important thing to understand about Australia. Gun ownership is not a right. It's not even neutral. It's something you must justify. To own a firearm, you must prove a genuine reason, and the government is very clear about what does not qualify. Self-defense is explicitly rejected. Unless you can pay for a security team like the people who make the laws, personal protection does not count. Fear doesn't count. So women with stalkers or late night shifts, you're out. Crime doesn't count, so the store in bad neighborhoods, good luck. Acceptable reasons are narrow: sport shooting, hunting, pest control, specific security occupations, but even then, approval isn't automatic. When Australia says apply for a license, this isn't a casual form. You apply through your state police system. You have to prove your genuine reason, submit ID, complete safety training, and then wait. And wait doesn't mean a few days. In some states, there's a mandatory waiting period before your application is even considered. In others, people are told upfront to expect months, not weeks, before approval. During that time, the police aren't just checking whether you have a criminal record. They're deciding whether you're a suitable person. That means your history, your circumstances, and whether the police believe you should continue to be trusted with permission. And if you spend any time reading Australian gun owner forums, you hear the same thing over and over. The hardest part isn't learning to shoot, it's staying compliant. If you lose your reason, you lose your license. Change your circumstances, you can lose the license. Raise concerns, the license can be suspended or revoked. Even though you paid for the gun, you maintain permission to keep it. Now let me ask you something, and I really want you to answer this in the comments. Should self-defense count as a valid reason to own a firearm? Yes or no? Let me know. And later, I'm going to show you the dumbest part of the system. The moment a normal person becomes a criminal without firing a shot. Chapter 3. Total compliance. Let's say you're approved by the people who have the guns. I mean the Australian government. That's not the finish line, it's the beginning. Because now you're not just a gun owner, you're a paperwork manager. Every firearm must be registered. Every purchase requires a permit. Most buys go through a permit process, and the first one often comes with a forced waiting period. Storage isn't a suggestion, it's a legal system. Approved safes, specific mounting requirements, ammunition has to be secured, Some states require it stored separately or in a locked compartment. And yes, police can inspect. Now, from what I understand is they don't just show up. You guys have to set up a convenient time for them to come by, so that's a plus. Miss a requirement, even without malicious intent, and you're no longer a compliant owner. You're a criminal. And you know what else is criminal? Not hitting that like button. Chapter 4, Crimes Without Violence. Here's where Australia's gun laws stop feeling preventative and start feeling unforgiving. You don't have to hurt anyone to face criminal penalties. In some cases, you don't even have to touch the gun. Fail to secure a firearm the way the law requires? That can be a criminal offense, even if no one was harmed. Not unsafe storage, incorrect storage. Possess a firearm outside the exact conditions of your license. That can be unlawful possession. Not misuse, not recklessness, just outside the rules. And then there's the quiet stuff most people never think about. A license renewal that lapses while you're awaiting approval. A condition you misunderstood. A form filed late or incorrectly. None of this involves violence. A lot of firearm offenses aren't about what you meant. They're about whether the legal conditions were met, licensing, permits, and storage. Miss one requirement and the status flips. Yesterday you were lawful, today you're not. Same person, same firearm, different legal reality. And that's the part most people outside Australia don't see. The consequences don't arrive because someone was harmed or you misused your gun. They arrive because the conditions weren't followed to a T. Chapter 5, Self-defense does not qualify. Australia does recognize self-defense in criminal law, but here's the line that never gets crossed. Firearms are not considered acceptable tools for personal protection. You cannot own one for that reason, and using one in that context invites extreme scrutiny, even in your own home, even in a life-threatening situation. After the threat ends, the legal process begins. Was it necessary? Was it proportionate? Was the firearm lawfully possessed under every condition? Why didn't you use another form of self-defense? The right to defend yourself exists, but the tools you're allowed to use are tightly controlled. And tragedies like Bondi don't soften that line, they harden it. So I want to know where you land on this. If the law says you're not allowed to prepare to defend yourself, who do you think is responsible when something goes wrong? Comment below. Chapter 6, Law versus Reality. Australia doesn't just react to tragedy, it legislates in the heat of it. And Bondi was no different. To show you how fast this is moving, look at what happened immediately after Bondi. New South Wales didn't just talk about reform, it pushed through major changes after a marathon debate. At the same time, it expanded police powers, including laws that can restrict public assemblies for up to 3 months after a terrorist incident, with leaders saying those powers would begin right away. And beyond New South Wales, new national infrastructure appeared, like a national database tied to hate crime charges across jurisdictions. That's the pattern. One event hits, and the system doesn't just respond, it expands fast. Meanwhile, the government openly acknowledges the other side of reality. Illegal firearms still exist, smuggling still happens, black markets still operate. The people most affected daily by tightening laws aren't the criminals. That's the trade of freedom for a semblance of security. Compliance becomes culture over time. Restriction becomes identity online. The real question is, when everything requires permission, what happens when permission isn't enough? And for those who don't need permission, we make concealed carry gear. Check out our everyday carry sweatpants and CCW athletic shorts linked below, or go see our full lineup at relaxfittactical.com. And let us know where you land on Australia's gun laws in the comments. Leave a like and don't be lame, subscribe.